Hi, my name's Paul Grogan, and in this video I'm going to be teaching you how to play Weather Machine, designed by Vitor Lacerda and published by Eagle Gryphon Games. According to Professor Seni Lativ, head of meteorological manipulation at Lightning Technologies, natural disasters will soon be a thing of the past. The initial tests of his latest invention, the Weather Machine, showed positive results. The professor had visions of a future world without floods, hurricanes and droughts. However, there were some side effects to his experiments. Each use of the weather machine also altered the conditions elsewhere on the planet, a butterfly effect. Professor Lativ's dreams of making the world a better place were crushed, and each test of the weather machine caused even worse side effects. "We must build a new prototype," announced the professor, "but this time we're going to get it right. We'll fix the problems we've caused, but the experiments must continue for the greater good." In Weather Machine, up to 4 players take on the role of scientists on Professor Lativ's team, securing funding for the project, helping complete the experiments in the Weather Machine itself, but also doing their own research, building prototypes and fixing the extreme weather they helped create. The player with the most climate points at the end of the game is declared the winner. I'll first explain how to set up the game and then go into the details of how you play. Thank you to Eagle Gryphon Games for sponsoring this video, but if you found it useful and you want to support my channel directly, I do rely on the financial support of my Patreon campaign in order to keep the channel going. You can become one of my Patreon supporters at patreon.com/gamingrules. Place the main board in the middle of the playing area. Each player chooses a colour and takes all of the pieces in that colour. Their scientist, 12 bots, 5 voucher markers, 3 funding markers, 6 breakthrough markers, a turn order marker, an initiative marker and a scoring marker. Each player places their scoring marker on the start space of the climate points track. Place the citation tokens, award tokens and investment tiles next to the board in the reserve. Place the Nobel Prize on the board. In Lativ's office, place the turn order marker for each player in a random order on the current turn order spaces. This determines the turn order at the start of the game. In the supply location, place the initiative markers for each player on their spaces in the same order as the turn order markers. Then, in the same order again, each player places their scientist on the action spaces at the bottom of the board in the supply location. Place Lativ on his space just above the scientists. Place the chemicals on their matching spaces in the supply. Shuffle the workshop tiles and place 4 of them at random on the board. Separate the remaining tiles into 2 equal stacks, placing one face up and the other face down nearby. In the government location, shuffle the subsidy tiles and place them at random, blue side up, 1 on each space. Place the 10 government research tokens in stacks of the same type on the indicated spaces. Place the 3 government markers here. Place all of the machine parts in a reserve next to the government location. Each player places one of their funding markers on the leftmost space of the government funding track. Separate the experiment tiles by stage and shuffle each stage separately, keeping the tiles face down. From the stage 3 tiles, choose 3 at random and return them to the box unseen. Then, create a single face down deck by placing the stage 2 tiles on top of the stage 1 tiles and the remaining stage 3 tiles on top. Flip the entire deck face up and place it on the indicated space in Lativ's lab. This is the experiment deck. Place the top 3 tiles of this deck into the 3 spaces to the right. This is known as the experiment display. Then place the next tile from the experiment deck in the space below the deck. Look at the weather type on the tile on top of the experiment deck and place Lativ's assistant below the branch of the weather machine for that type of weather. Place the 15 lab research tokens in stacks of the same type on the indicated spaces. If playing with 2 or 3 players, use only 2 of each type. In a 3 to 4 player game, place Lativ's 5 bots to the side of the lab. In a 2-player game, place one of Lativ's bots on the bottom space of each branch of the machine. Place a lock token on each of the 5 citation spaces. Each player places one of their funding markers on the leftmost space of the lab funding track. Separate the extreme weather tiles by type. Find the level 1 tile of each type as indicated by the 1 red bar here. Then, in R&D, place the level 1 tiles on their indicated spaces. Place the other extreme weather tiles in stacks next to the main board with the level 2 tiles on top. Place the 10 R&D research tokens in stacks of the same type on the indicated spaces. Each player places their remaining funding marker on the leftmost space of the R&D funding track. In a 2-player game, place a voucher marker of an unused player colour on the rightmost action space of each of the main locations, Government, Lab and R&D. That space cannot be used during the game. Each player takes a laboratory and places it in front of them. Your assembly line is divided into 4 sections, each with 3 spaces. Place your 12 bots on these spaces. Place your voucher markers on the starting positions of each of your voucher tracks, as indicated by the dashed circles. You start with 4 supply vouchers, 1 government voucher, 1 lab voucher, 1 R&D voucher and 2 science vouchers. The area on the right side of your laboratory is known as your office. Place your breakthrough markers on their spaces here. Take 1 machine part of each colour, mix them up and give 1 at random to each player, returning any leftovers back to the reserve. Take 1 workshop tile from the top of the face down stack per player and give 1 at random to each player. The far right of your laboratory and the area to the right of it is known as your workshop. Place the machine part you got on the space in the middle row, and place the workshop tile you got next to the middle row, with the coloured half circles at the top and bottom. It doesn't matter which way up it goes. Sort the gold tiles into sets based on the symbol in the bottom left corner. Each player chooses 1 of those sets at random and places them below their laboratory. Once you are experienced with the game, there's a drafting variant for these tiles as explained in the rulebook. And that is how you set up a weather machine. Weather Machine is a game with a lot of interconnecting mechanisms and can be overwhelming when you first play it. In this part of the video, I'm going to try and explain from a high level what it is that you're trying to do. On each turn of the game, you will send your scientist to work in one of the locations on the board: Supply, Government, the Lab, or R&D. You will then perform actions in that location. During the game, you will gain research tokens, which you will move to your office. When you complete a row, you can publish a paper about that type of weather. And once you've published a paper, you can then build a prototype in your workshop. This prototype will help fix the extreme weather caused by the weather machine. You can also contribute to the experiments being run in Lativ's lab, although each experiment causes more extreme weather to happen. And you can help the government complete their own machines, which they are building to help fix the weather themselves. All of these things will earn you climate points, but there's a lot of other things that you can do too. Before I jump into the full details on how the game plays, I just wanted to explain a few important things first. Your voucher markers track how many vouchers you have of each type. Vouchers are gained by moving your scientist to locations and are spent to perform various actions. Whenever you gain a voucher, move the corresponding marker up, but no more than the top of the track. When you pay a voucher, move the marker down. And you cannot pay what you don't have. Science vouchers are wild and may be spent as if they were any other type of voucher. During the game, there are 3 types of executive exchanges that you can make, as depicted here on your laboratory. Whenever you need to pay a voucher, if you do not have one of the required type or a science voucher, you may pay any 3 other vouchers instead. Whenever you need to pay a machine part, if you don't have one of the required type, you may pay any 2 vouchers to exchange one of your machine parts for the one you need. And in a similar way, whenever you need to pay a chemical, if you don't have one of the required type, you may pay any 2 vouchers to exchange one of your chemicals with the one that you need from the supply. The returned chemical is placed back in the supply on the rightmost matching empty slot, and you take the leftmost chemical of the type you need. Note that these 3 executive exchanges cannot just be done whenever you want to. They can only be done when you need something that you do not have. And in the case of exchanging machine parts and chemicals, the new piece is used immediately. It never goes into your workshop. After setting up the game, but before the first round, there is a post-setup supply round. Because each player's scientist starts in the supply location, each player in turn order takes a turn in which they perform any number of actions in this location. This is essentially the same as if you chose to visit that location during the game, so I'll explain it now in full, and then when I come to explaining the other actions later, I'll skip this one. There are 5 possible actions in the supply location. Each of the action spaces here shows the infinity icon in a red circle. This means that you can do as many of those actions as you want to in any order, and you can do the same action multiple times. The first action to explain is Extend Workshop. This costs 1 supply voucher as depicted here. Take one of the workshop tiles on the board and then refill the space with the top tile from the face-up stack. Or you could choose to take the one from the top of the face-up stack instead. If the stack is ever empty, flip over the face down stack so that there is a new face up stack. The tile you take must be immediately placed orthogonally adjacent to an existing space of your workshop, either one of the pre-printed spaces or any other workshop tile that you already have. The first tile you buy must therefore go in one of these three spaces. You can extend as far to the right as you like, but you may not extend above or below the edge of your laboratory, so the workshop can only be a maximum of 3 tiles from top to bottom. The semicircles on the tile must be at the top and bottom, so you can choose one of 2 orientations when placing the tile. However, if 2 semicircles touch, their colours must match. And once placed, workshop tiles cannot be moved or rotated during the game. You want to increase the size of your workshop so that you have more spaces to store your bots, chemicals and machine parts. It's also where you will build your prototype, which I'll explain later. The second action in supply is construct a bot. At the start of the game, you only have access to the top 2 sections of your assembly line. To construct a bot from the top left section costs 1 supply voucher, and one from the top right section costs 2 supply vouchers. You can choose any bot from a section available to you. You do not have to take the bots in order. After paying the cost, take the chosen bot and immediately gain the benefit depicted next to the slot. The bot must be immediately placed in your workshop, on either the space in the bottom left if it is empty, or an empty workshop tile. If you do not have the space for the bot, you cannot perform this action. Note that the workshop tiles can store either one bot or one machine part, as indicated by the illustration, but not both. I'll explain how you get more machine parts later on. You need bots in your workshop to help the government build their own machine, help with the experiments in the lab, and to conduct research in R&D. The bottom 2 sections of your assembly line are only available to you once you have constructed the depicted number of bots, 6 or 9. Or you have the depicted number of tokens in your office, 5 or 8. Here, for example, you have a total of 6 tokens in your office, which includes the one here. Therefore, the bottom left section of your assembly line is now available to you. The third action to explain is acquire a chemical. Take the leftmost chemical of the type that you want from the supply, paying a number of supply vouchers as indicated by the section it is in. For example, here, you can acquire the white or salmon chemicals for 1 supply voucher, the green or blue chemicals for 2 supply vouchers, and the magenta chemical for 3 supply vouchers. Then, place the chemical in your workshop. The space in the top left of your workshop can hold 1 chemical of any type. Other chemicals are stored on a matching coloured space formed by 2 adjacent workshop tiles. For example, only a green chemical can be stored here. If you do not have the space for the chemical, you cannot perform this action. You will need chemicals to send bots to the lab and R&D. The fourth action is return a chemical. This is something you would not do during the post-setup supply round, but you might want to do it during the game. Return a chemical from your workshop to the rightmost empty space of the supply for the type of chemical. Then gain the indicated supply vouchers for the section it was placed in. So here, if you return this green chemical, you would gain 2 supply vouchers. The final action in the supply location is to take the initiative. This costs 1 supply voucher, and you move your initiative marker to any new position, sliding all other markers to the left or right as appropriate. This sets the position that you want to be in turn order for the next round. Sometimes you want to go first, other times you may want to go last. After all players have taken their turn in this special post-setup supply round, the turn order is adjusted to match the current order of the initiative markers in supply. So, if one or more players performed the take the initiative action, that change takes effect before the game properly starts. Since I've just talked about placing bots and chemicals into your workshop, I'm just going to explain a bit more about that before moving on. I'm also going to talk a bit about machine parts, which you can gain from various benefits. On the left spaces of your workshop, 1 bot can be stored here, 1 machine part can be stored here, and 1 chemical can be stored here. Each workshop tile can store either 1 bot or 1 machine part, but not both. Each coloured circle formed by 2 workshop tiles can store 1 chemical of the matching colour. Bots, chemicals and machine parts may be moved around your workshop at any time, including swapping the positions of 2 items, as long as each one is moved to a legal space. And even though you can move things around freely, that doesn't mean that you can just remove bots, chemicals or machine parts unless you are explicitly allowed to do so. So, if you gained a machine part and you had nowhere to store it, you are not allowed to just remove a bot to give you a space for the machine part. But, if the space in the bottom left of your workshop was empty, you could move the bot there to free up the workshop tile, giving you space to store the machine part. And remember, you cannot move your workshop tiles once placed. The game is played over a series of rounds, with each round divided into 3 phases as shown here on the main board. In Phase A, each player in turn order will take a turn where they move their scientist to a location and perform actions. In Phase B, an experiment is run in the lab. And in Phase C, turn order is adjusted, and if Latif is in his office, all players gain income. This process continues until the end of the game is triggered, and after final scoring, the player with the most climate points is declared the winner. During Phase A, each player in turn order takes a turn. On your turn, you perform 4 steps which are summarised on your player board. Step 1, use 1 subsidy tile or investment tile. Step 2, move your scientist. Step 3, perform actions. And Step 4, place research tokens. Step 1 is to use either a subsidy tile or an investment tile. You don't start the game with any of these tiles, so you can't do this on the first turn of the game, but I will explain it now as you will acquire these during the game. You can only use a subsidy tile if it is blue side up. To use it, gain the benefit printed on it and then flip the tile over. All the benefits are explained on the back page of the player aid. Alternatively, if you have an investment tile, you may return it to the reserve to do one of the following 2 things: set a goal or receive funding. To set a goal, choose one of your goal tiles and move it to an empty goal space of your laboratory that matches the colour of the tile. Gain the benefit depicted on the space that you just covered. The goal tile sets an end of game scoring condition for you. These are all described in the player aid. Choose one that you think you will be able to complete by the end of the game. The second option when you return an investment tile is to receive funding. You can only do this if you have a goal tile in your laboratory. To receive funding, you must flip over one of your previously set goal tiles to the black side. A flipped goal tile still scores at the end of the game, but it cannot be used again to receive funding. Then, you receive funding from the track that matches the colour of the tile you just flipped over. Government for blue tiles, the lab for green tiles, and R&D for the lilac tiles. For the government track, you gain the benefits of the space your marker is on and every space to the left of it. Here, purple would gain any 1 chemical and any 1 voucher. For the lab funding track, you first gain science vouchers depicted below the space that you are in and every space to the left of it. But then, in addition to your science vouchers, you choose one of the other 2 funding tracks and gain the benefits of that track, treating your marker as if it was a number of spaces further ahead, as shown by the modifier below your marker on this lab track. For example, purple would first gain 2 science vouchers. Then, they choose either the government or R&D funding track and gain the benefits of that track, treating their marker as if it were 2 spaces further ahead than it actually is. So, if they chose the government track, they gain the benefits as if their marker was here, which would be these 3 benefits. For the R&D funding track, you gain 1 benefit depicted below the space your marker is in, or any space to the left of it. Here, for example, purple chooses any one of these benefits. The benefit of each of the funding tracks is shown in the back of the rulebook. Step 2 of the player turn is to move your scientist. You must move your scientist to an empty action space in a different location from your current one. There are 5 locations in the game, but players can only visit 4 of them. Latif is the only one with a key to his office, and he doesn't let anyone else in. In the first round of the game, a special rule applies. If a location is empty, you must move to the middle action space. If the middle space is occupied, the rightmost space may be chosen instead. You cannot choose the leftmost action space in round 1. After round 1, you can move to any action space as long as you move to a different location. After placing your scientist, you either gain or pay vouchers depending on the location chosen. For the main 3 locations, government, the lab and R&D, you gain the voucher depicted on the space where you place your scientist, plus an additional 1 voucher of the same type for each player to your left. You also gain 1 science voucher if Latif is at that location and also to your left. Here, for example, if you are purple and you move to the government location, you gain 1 lab voucher plus 1 additional lab voucher for the orange player to your left. You also gain 1 science voucher because Latif is at the location and to your left. The supply location is different. First, you gain 1 voucher of any type, which could be a science voucher, and if Latif is there, you also gain 1 science voucher. But then you must pay 1 voucher of any type for each other player on spaces to the left of you. If you cannot pay the vouchers, you cannot place your scientist here. For example, you move to supply. You gain 1 voucher of any type, plus 1 science voucher because Lativ is there. However, you must then pay any 1 voucher because there is 1 player to your left. After gaining and paying vouchers, if Lativ is at the location you moved to, move him to the next location in numeric order. If he moves to his office, simply place him on the designated space. If he moves to one of the main locations, place him on the leftmost empty action space. And if all action spaces are full, he moves to the next location. Every time Lativ moves, check the active branch of the weather machine in the lab, which is the one where the assistant is. If the branch does not have one of Lativ's bots, move one of Lativ's bots from the area next to the lab onto any empty space of the branch. It doesn't matter which one. If Lativ already has a bot in the branch, or the branch was full, place a bot in the next branch following the arrows. And in the case that all branches are either full or already contain one of Lativ's bots, do not place a bot. If you're playing a 2-player game, there is a special rule when Lativ moves to either the government or R&D. You discard a research token from the location that Lativ just moved to, of the same type of weather as the active branch of the weather machine. In this case, 1 wind token is removed. Step 3 of your turn is performing actions. If your scientist is on a space with this icon, you may perform one of the actions in that location. Here, for example, that is either this one or this one. However, if your scientist is on a space with this icon, you may perform one or both of the actions in that location. Note that all of the spaces in supply allow you to perform all 5 actions in that location. And all actions are optional. You are allowed to perform no actions at all, although you probably want to. I'll explain all of the possible actions in the next chapter of the video. Step 4 of your turn is to place research tokens. Whenever you gain a research token during the game, you place it on this space here in the top left of your office, and it is possible to collect more than one of them on your turn. As the last step of your turn, you must move any research tokens on this space into your office itself. Your office is divided into 3 columns, 1 for each type of research token. Government tokens can only be placed in the left, lab tokens in the middle, and the R&D tokens in the right. If you place a token on a space depicting a benefit, you get that benefit immediately. Note that the images of the desks are just artwork, they are not icons or benefits. Each row of your office can only have research tokens from 1 type of weather. So here, for example, if you are about to place a snow research token, it cannot go here, because this row is already assigned to researching rain. You can also start a second row of tiles for a type of weather. So if you gain another snow research token later, you do not have to put it in the same row as the first one. You could start a second row if you wanted to. And since I'm talking about placing research tokens, I wanted to just touch on award tokens. You gain these from completing a breakthrough, and they are placed on this space here. Unlike research tokens, however, award tokens do not need to be placed at the end of your turn. You can if you want to, but you can also keep them until you want to place them, which can be done at any point on a future turn. Award tokens can be placed on any empty space in your office, effectively counting as a wildcard. I've already covered the supply location when I explained the post-setup supply round. Visiting this location during the game is exactly the same. You can perform any of the 5 possible actions as many times as you want. The other difference with the supply location compared to the other locations is, as mentioned earlier, placing your scientist here will cost you vouchers if there are other players to the left of you. The 2 possible actions in the government location are sell a part and secure subsidy. The sell a part action represents you assisting the government by providing them with a bot and a machine part in exchange for subsidies and their research data. To perform this action, you must spend 1 government voucher, and then you follow the steps depicted here. First, advance your marker 1 space on the government funding track. Then, place 1 bot from your workshop onto any empty space of the government machine. You must have a machine part in your workshop matching the colour of the space. For example, if you have a green and blue machine part, you can only place a bot in the green or blue spaces. Then, take a subsidy tile from the same column as where you placed the bot, and replace it with a machine part from your workshop matching the colour of the space where you placed the bot. Place the subsidy tile you took to the left of your laboratory. During the game, some of the subsidy tiles can get flipped over. You can take any one, whether it is blue side up or orange side up. but if you take an orange one, then you flip it over to the blue side when placing it next to your laboratory. Also note that you cannot have two subsidy tiles of the same type. Finally, take a research token from below the column where you place the bot and place it in the top left of your office. If there are no research tokens left, gain an investment tile instead, placing it to the left of your laboratory. Remember, subsidy tiles and investment tiles may be used in step 1 of your turn. If, after performing the sell apart action, all bot spaces in a branch of the government machine are full, the government has completed their work on their own prototype to fix that type of extreme weather. If that happens, each player gains 3 points for each of their bots in the branch. Then move one of the government markers from here to the leftmost empty space on the extreme weather tile matching the branch that just got completed. And if an extreme weather tile has all of its spaces full, this represents that the weather is fixed. Any government markers are returned back to the government, any breakthrough markers from players are removed from the game. And the extreme weather tile is placed back on the corresponding stack next to the board. The other action in the government location is securing a subsidy. This costs 2 government vouchers and you follow the steps depicted here. First, choose any blue subsidy tile in the government area and gain the benefits depicted at the top of the column and to the left of the row. Then gain the benefit of the tile itself and flip the tile over to the orange side. These benefits are explained at the back of the rulebook. The 2 possible actions in the lab are work on experiment and publish a paper. The lab is where Lativ's original weather machine is. Despite the problems it causes, the experiments continue to be run, and players can contribute to these, gathering more data. To perform the work on experiment action, pay 1 lab voucher and follow the steps depicted here. First, advance your marker 1 space on the lab funding track. Then, place 1 bot from your workshop onto any empty space in any column of the weather machine. You must have a chemical in your workshop as depicted on the space. You may also place your bot onto a space occupied by one of Lativ's bots. If you do, move Lativ's bots to another empty space in the same branch, or if the branch was full, place it back next to the lab instead. You must then pay the chemical depicted on the space where you placed your bot, moving it from your workshop back to the supply. You do not get any vouchers for returning the chemical. And remember, if you don't have a chemical of the right type, you may pay any 2 vouchers to exchange one of your chemicals for the one you need. Note that unlike in the government area, nothing happens immediately if you complete a branch of the weather machine. The experiment only runs in Phase B of the round after all players have taken their turn. I'll explain the experiment running later in the video, but contributing to these experiments will gain you points and other bonuses. There is one thing I wanted to mention here, and this is more game advice rather than rules. Be very careful when choosing which branch to place your bot. You want to avoid sending a bot to the branch where the experiment never runs. Look at the display of experiment tiles and the one coming up next, and also look at the position of Lativ's assistant. And if you can, try to work out what the other players might do, since an experiment only runs if there's an experiment tile in the display matching the weather of the branch where the assistant is, and that branch is full of bots. For example, here the active branch is Sun, and because there is a Sun experiment tile in the display, then in Phase B that is the experiment which will run, but only if the branch is full of bots. So if you were to send a bot to that branch but none of the other players do, then the experiment won't run and the tile will be discarded and the assistant moves on. So think carefully about where to place your bot. The second possible action in the lab is to publish a paper. This costs 2 lab vouchers and you follow the steps depicted here. First, you must choose a row in your office that is filled with tokens, at least one of which must be a research token. Remember, you can place any award tokens you have at any time. So a completed row could be made up of 3 research tokens, 2 research tokens and an award token, or 1 research token and 2 awards. There is a way that you can publish with only 2 tokens in the row by citing someone else's work. I'll explain this later on. To publish a paper, slide the breakthrough marker to the right to indicate that the paper is now published. You immediately gain the benefit that the breakthrough marker moved over. Then you gain points as shown here. 2 points for each research token in the row, and 4 points for each award token. I'll mention these black citation tokens later on. Finally, take an investment tile and place it to the left of your laboratory. As depicted here, if you're the first player to publish a paper about a specific type of weather, you unlock the corresponding citation space here, and may immediately pay 1 science voucher to gain 3 points. From now on, any player, including you, may publish a paper of that type of weather with only 2 tokens in the row, by citing the previously published work. To cite someone else's work, you must remove from the game one of your goal tiles from below your laboratory, whose colour matches the empty space. Then, you take a citation token and place it on the space in your office to complete the row, gaining the benefit covered over as usual. But note that citation tokens are not worth any points when you gain the points for publishing. The 2 possible actions in R&D are research and breakthrough. To perform the research action, pay 1 R&D voucher and follow the steps depicted here. First, advance your marker 1 space on the R&D funding track. Then, move 1 bot from your workshop to an empty research space in any branch of R&D. You must pay the chemical depicted to the left of the space, but unlike when paying a chemical to work in the lab, you place the chemical on the space itself. You immediately gain the benefit depicted on the space where you placed your bot. Note that the bottom space of a branch is special. There is an additional cost as depicted to the right of the research space, which must be paid. In this case, the additional chemical paid here is returned to the supply and not placed on the space. The benefit of placing a bot on the bottom space of a branch, however, is better. You gain 1 bot from your assembly line for free. Finally, you take a research token from below the column where you place the bot and move it to the top left of your office. Since there are 3 spaces in each branch and only 2 research tokens, if you complete a branch by placing a 3rd bot, you will not be able to take a research token. In this case, follow the iconography depicted here. Take an investment tile, placing it to the left of your laboratory, and then, if the citation space matching the type of weather in the branch is still locked, unlock it and you may pay 1 science voucher to gain 3 points. The second action you can perform in R&D is breakthrough. This costs 2 R&D vouchers and you follow the steps depicted here. First, you must choose a row in your office where you have previously published a paper. That is, the breakthrough marker has been slid to the right. Then, according to the extreme weather tile matching the type of weather as the paper you published, pay the science vouchers depicted on the tile, if any. Next, move the breakthrough marker from the row in your office to any empty space on the extreme weather tile, gaining the benefit of that space. Note that each player can only have 1 marker on each extreme weather tile. The next step is to build a prototype using your machine parts. The parts required to build a prototype are the 3 depicted below the extreme weather tile on the research spaces, plus any depicted at the top of the tile itself. Here, for example, the cost to build a prototype to help fix this extreme windy weather is 1 blue, 2 green, plus the 1 magenta for the tile itself. However, each bot on a research space of the branch, either yours or someone else's, may provide that part for you, or you could choose to provide it yourself. So why would you want to use your own parts if a bot is providing them for you? Well, because each part you provide yourself gains you 2 points. If another player's bot provides a part for you, that player gains 2 points. And your bots in the branch always gain you 2 points whether they provided a part for you or not. For example, we already know that a prototype for this branch requires 1 magenta, 1 blue and 2 green machine parts. However, you as purple have a bot on the blue research space, and the yellow player has a bot on one of the green research spaces. So let's go through the options. You could simply provide all 4 parts yourself, ignoring the free parts from the bots. You gain 8 points for providing 4 parts, plus 2 points for your bot. The yellow player would get no points. Or you could let your bot provide the blue part for you. This saves you 1 blue part, but you only gain 6 points for providing 3 parts. You still get the 2 points for your bot. Or you could let the yellow bot provide the green part for you. Again, you get 6 points for providing 3 parts, but the yellow player gets 2 points because their bot provided a part. And as always, you still get the 2 points for your bot. And the final option is to let both bots provide their parts. You only spend 1 magenta and 1 green, so you get 4 points, yellow gets 2, and you get 2 points for your bot. Once you have worked out exactly which parts you need to provide, those parts must be in the same row of your workshop. Return the provided parts to the reserve. And then, after providing the parts, if there were any other parts in the same row that you didn't need for the prototype, they are lost, and you don't get any points for them. However, remember that you can rearrange your parts in your workshop at any time. So in this case, you could swap the positions of the white machine part with one of your bots. Now you can build the prototype and not lose any more parts than required. Finally, you are rewarded for building a prototype and helping fix the weather. You gain one award token and place it in the top left of your office. Remember that award tokens can be moved at any time during your turn to an empty space in your office. If you are the first player to gain 3 award tokens, you are rewarded further for your amazing work by winning the Nobel Prize. This is worth 5 points at the end of the game, and taking it is one of the end of game triggers. After this action is complete, if all of the spaces on the extreme weather tile are full, the weather is fixed. All breakthrough markers from players on the tile are removed from the game, and any government markers on the tile are returned back to the government area. Then, the tile is removed from the board and placed on top of the corresponding stack next to the board. After all players have taken a turn, Lativ's assistant attempts to run an experiment on the active branch of the weather machine in the lab. The active branch is the one where the assistant is. The first step in this process is to determine whether or not the experiment actually runs. An experiment runs if both of the following is true. There is at least one experiment tile in the display matching the weather of the active branch, and there is a bot on every space of the active branch. If both of these are true, the experiment runs and you will follow this sequence here. If either of them is not true, the experiment does not run and you follow this sequence here instead. I'll first cover what happens if the experiment does not run, as that is shorter. If the experiment does not run, all players with bots in the active branch may choose to return them to their workshop, or they can leave them in place, hoping that a future experiment will need them. If you return a bot and there is no space for it in your workshop, place it on any empty space in the top 2 sections of your assembly line. Also, if the experiment does not run, move any of Lativ's bots in the active branch back to their space beside the lab. Then remove from the game the rightmost experiment tile in the display that matches the weather of the active branch. Slide the remaining tiles to the right, move the tile that is below the deck to the display, and then move the top tile of the deck to the space below it. If the experiment did not run because there was no tile in the display matching the active branch, such as here if the active branch is snow, then no tile is removed. And in the case where there are 2 tiles in the display matching the active branch, remove the rightmost one. Finally, move Lativ's assistant to the next branch following the arrows. Note that if the assistant was in the snow branch, move it to the rain branch. If, however, the experiment does run, the process is a bit more involved, as you can see here. First, if there is more than one experiment tile in the display matching the weather of the active branch, the rightmost one is the active experiment. In current turn order, each player with a bot in the active branch performs the following 5 steps. First, return your bots from the active branch to your workshop. Again, if you don't have space for a bot, return it to one of the top 2 sections of your assembly line. Next, you may pay the number of science vouchers shown on the active experiment tile. This is either 1 or 2. Remember, if you don't have any science vouchers, you can always use any 3 other vouchers instead. If you don't pay the science vouchers, you skip the rest of the steps of this sequence and the next player resolves their bots. If you do pay the vouchers, you have 3 more steps to perform. Step 3 is that you gain points depicted on the experiment tile for each bot that you returned. Step 4 is that you gain one of the benefits depicted on the tile. Note that you only gain this benefit once, even if you had more than one bot in the branch. Step 5 is that you take a research token from the active branch if there is one available. If there isn't one, you gain 1 science voucher instead. However, unlike research tokens that you gain on your turn, this one must be placed immediately on a row in your office. If you cannot do that, remove the tile from the game. After all players with bots in the active branch have performed those 5 steps, the experiment is complete. If Lativ had one of his bots in the active branch, move it to its space beside the lab. Then, take the top extreme weather tile from the stack next to the board, matching the type of weather from the active branch, and place it onto the corresponding space in R&D, covering up any existing tile. If there were any markers on the existing tile, remove them as usual. Understanding how the machine runs is an important part of the game, so I'm going to go over that again with an example. Here, the active branch is snow, and there are 2 snow experiment tiles in the display, so the rightmost of these is the active one. The snow branch is full, so the experiment runs. You as purple have 2 bots in the branch, and orange has 1. You are before orange in turn order, so you resolve your bots first, removing them from the branch and placing them back in your workshop. The experiment tile depicts a cost of 2 science vouchers. You only have 1 science voucher, so you pay that, and then you do an executive exchange using 2 government vouchers and 1 lab voucher as the second science voucher. For this, you gain 6 points per bot. You returned 2 bots, so you get 12 points. You then choose either one of the 2 benefits on the right side of the tile. You choose to take an investment tile. Afterwards, you then take the last remaining research token from the branch and place it in your office. Then it is orange. They remove their bot, pay 2 science vouchers and score 6 points. They choose the other effect, which allows them to immediately perform the sell apart action in the government area. And after that, because there are no research tokens left, orange gains 1 science voucher. Then, after the experiment runs, perform the same 2 final steps just like you did if the experiment did not run. You remove the active experiment tile from the game, slide the rest along, and then move Lativ's assistant. After the experiment is run, 2 more steps are needed at the end of the round. First, turn order is adjusted to match the position of the initiative markers. This will have changed if someone visited the supply location and chose the Take the Initiative action. Next is income, but this only happens if Lativ is in his office. If he is, all players gain the depicted benefits on every empty space in the top 2 sections of their assembly line, as indicated by this icon here. So here you would gain 1 government voucher, 1 science voucher and 1 machine part. And finally, Lativ is moved to his space in supply. The end of the game is triggered once any of the following 4 things happen. A player takes the Nobel Prize, which they gain from having 3 award tokens, or the last experiment tile is placed in the display during phase B of a round, or the government machine is complete with bots in all spaces, or all research spaces in R&D have bots in them. When the end of the game is triggered, finish the current round and play 1 final round, but skip phase C in the final round. Then, just before final scoring happens, all players may place any research tokens and award tokens they have onto any empty spaces in their office, following the usual rules. This is done because some of the goal tiles require you to have completed rows or columns in your office. Also at this time, players may use any remaining investment tiles they have to either set a new goal or to flip a goal to gain funding. Final scoring is relatively simple. You gain points based on the position of each of your markers on the funding tracks. Here, for example, black and orange score 3 points, yellow scores 4, and purple scores 6. Then you score 5 points for each goal tile you have in your laboratory where you meet the conditions depicted on it. These goal tiles are all explained in the player aid. Finally, you score 5 points if you have the Nobel Prize. And the player with the most climate points wins. Check the tiebreaker section in the rulebook should 2 or more players have the most points. I hope you found this video useful in learning how to play Weather Machine. If you want to see a full 3-player playthrough video, I have one of those on the channel, which you can get to by clicking on the little eye in the corner. Thanks again to Eagle Griffin Games for asking me to create this video, and if you like the content that I create and you want to support the channel directly, you can do so at patreon.com/gaming rules. Until next time, take care and thanks for watching.